Good afternoon. I see we got a lot of people joining us from all around the world. It's so wonderful to be here with you. My name is Chip Huth, and I represent the Arbinger Institute. And we're here today to talk about creating self-aware leaders. So let's jump right in. The first thing I'd like you to do, wherever you're at, is I want you to think about someone in your organization who doesn't fully see their impact on others. You should maybe visualize that person. If you're somewhere where you can write, on a piece of paper or on an iPad or some other writing surface, you might want to write their name down, just so you can keep them front of mind as we're going through the presentation today. But you're thinking about someone again who doesn't fully see their impact on other people. Now, what I'd like you to do, thinking about that person, what behaviors is this person engaging in? Specifically, what are they doing, and what is the impact that those behaviors are having on others in the organization? So just jot down a couple of things that they're doing specifically, and then the impact of those things on other people in the organization. I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, so we're talking about self-awareness today. I suspect that if you have someone in your organization who's behaving in a way that's detrimental to the rest of the team, my suspicion is that that is generally attributable to a lack of awareness on their part. What do I mean by that? Well, again, in my experience, most people are not malicious. Often we engage in behaviors that undermine our ability to achieve our collective mission, but it isn't a byproduct generally of people sitting around conspiring to do that intentionally. It generally happens because we just aren't aware of the impact we have on other folks. We don't fully appreciate the ways in which we show up that make things more difficult in other people. That's certainly been my experience personally. I can tell you that going way back, I was born into an abusive family. And I was homeless at the time I was born. And I kind of adopted this way of seeing the world early on, that it was kind of me against the world. I think I kind of positioned myself to see others more competitively. I was comparative in my way of showing up with other people. I felt that I constantly had to prove myself. I had to prove something about myself to other people. And that really inhibited the way that, it inhibited my ability to be effective with others. I carried that through my childhood, problems in school that would manifest as a result of that. A tendency to absolve myself of responsibility for things that I got wrong or did wrong. I carried that with me into the military, and I started my leadership journey kind of with that frame of mind, right? Always looking externally for reasons to explain why I didn't meet expectations, or finding ways to blame or accuse other people whenever things didn't go the way that they should go in terms of me meeting my obligations to other people. I really lacked a basic awareness about, around what I was responsible for. And I just found it really easy to find excuses outside of myself for not meeting, again, my obligations. That was my experience. And look, it would be real easy to, you hear that story. It might be real easy for you to say, well, yeah, Chip, we can absolve you of that because, look at the situation into which you were born. But look, that's not a unique story in the sense that a lot of people are born into situations like that. It was my interpretation of those circumstances that caused me to lose my sense of other people and how real they were. So I learned in the military, one thing I did learn is that I really enjoyed serving, and I particularly liked working in small teams. So experiences that I had as a child taught me that folks in law enforcement, peace officers, They showed up in times of crisis to help us when we needed help. And that's what inspired me to want to serve in the military when I was younger. And I thought I could continue that service to my community as a police officer. And so I thought, well, working in small teams, being a police officer, to me, SWAT was like the perfect marriage of those two things. I could use some of the things I learned in the military and still serve my community as a peace officer while working in tight-knit team. And so I start looking around the country, and I find that Kansas City, Missouri, had one of the largest SWAT teams in the nation, like 60 full-time members in the SWAT team. And so I apply, I become a police officer there. I eventually make it to the SWAT team. And, things are wonderful. I mean, it was like it met all my expectations in terms of what I thought it would be, right? What I thought I wanted to do and how I could serve. And I love the camaraderie and the team ability, and I love the missions and all the things associated with that. And things went wonderfully for me. I got involved in a couple critical incidents, and I was invited to leave to go be an instructor at the police academy. I was a little bit resentful about that, but you have a chain of command, you follow it, you go. Now, look, I carried my attitude, that again, that self-protective kind of competitive attitude with me into that new role. And all I really thought about as I was serving there was, how do I get back to SWAT? And the path became really clear. Look, what I had to do was get promoted. That was the only way I was going to be able to have a chance to get back to SWAT. And so I studied and I got a college degree, and I ended up passing the promotional exam. And I was eventually invited back to the SWAT teams. But kind of like the neat thing about it was I was invited back to an elite section of SWAT, a very kinetic section. This was the kind of the busiest of the SWAT teams. And I got called down to the deputy chief's office. Rachel Whipple was her name at the time. And she said, Chip, I'd like to put you into this team, because what I need you to do is I need you to turn this team around. They are really struggling in a big way. And they actually are representing our brand to the community, to the world, really, has the interconnectivity by virtue of the internet and all social media apps that were pervasive at that time. Basically, this team is misrepresenting us in our vision. They're getting a lot of lawsuits. They're generating a lot of complaints from the community. Property damage, discourtesy, use of force, these type of things. And Chip, what I need you to do is go in there and turn that team around. I need you to be that leader that actually makes an impact with that team and helps them, show up in the way that represents our values as an organization. And in my mind, as she's saying this to me, I'm thinking, well, look, there's no way anyone can do the things you're asking me to do. Of course, they're going to get lawsuits and complaints. They do kinetic work. They're serving high risk search warrants and kicking in doors and doing that type of thing. And it's like, complaints are going to follow that type of work like night follows day. That's what I'm thinking. But what I'm saying to the deputy chief is, yes, I'm your guy, because I wanted to be back in that team so badly. Right. So I'll share with you one of the KPIs that she shared with me that kind of illustrates the problem. So remember, there were lawsuits, there were mediations, there were all kinds of problems that were happening as a result of this work the team was doing in the community. But this one KPI dealt with community complaints. These are complaints that are filed officially with the Office of Community Complaints and investigated over a period of months. So it's actually a lot of work for someone to file a complaint like this, and it's a very involved process to dispose of the complaint. So at the time that she invited me to go back to that team, we're looking at 36 complaints on average per year for one squad. $70,000 per complaint. That's what it costs to investigate it from soup to nuts, right? Open to close. So $2.5 million a year, $25.2 million over the course of 10 years. That is a lot of money just represented in that one KPI, right? So why was that tolerated? In my estimation, the reason that was tolerated, because this had been a pervasive issue for several years with this particular SWAT team. The reason it was tolerated was they were seizing a lot of guns, they were seizing a lot of drugs, and they were getting a lot of felony arrests. So much like me, and my mindset at the time was, well, it's kind of the cost of doing business. But that kind of paints, again, one aspect of the challenge. So I go in there and I'm thinking, well, look, the results this team is achieving, represented here on the screen by this triangle graphic, the results this team is achieving is driven in large part by what? Well, it's by what they're doing. You get out of something what you put into it. That's pretty logical if you think about it. If I decide that I have a goal that I want to achieve, I have to have a plan, a strategy, a system in order to achieve that goal. I have to engage in the right behaviors to get the results I'm after. That's true for an individual, and it's also true for a team relative to the collective behaviors. So my thought in my mind was, if the behaviors are what's driving the results, if the behaviors they're engaging in are what is resulting in the complaints, then what needs to change is the behavior. So stepping outside of that story for a second, I want you to think about the person that you're thinking about in your organization, the person that needs to change. What have you tried to do to get this person to change their behavior to date? What have you done? And please throw it in the chat. Feel free to do that. I'll give you a few minutes. Couple of minutes here. What have you done to date to get that person you identify that needs to change some way to change? So we've got advise and mentor, constructive feedback with examples, coaching conversations, discussions, actually be a positive influence, active listening, hints, explaining explaining to them their impact on others, provide frank feedback, discipline. Okay, model behavior. Yeah, lots of good ideas, right? Lots of good ideas. Okay, so thinking about me for a second as I'm going into this team, let me tell you a little secret. My stated mission, the mission that was handed to me by Deputy Chief Whipple, was to turn that team around, to help that team improve its impact, and to help that team improve its image, right? To actually reduce the complaints and lawsuits. That was the stated mission given to me. But the thing you have to know is that I had a super secret mission, and that super secret mission was very self-focused. That super secret mission that superseded the stated mission, by the way, was to look good to the colonel. I wanted to prove to her that she picked the right person for the job. That was the thing I was actually trying to accomplish above all else. So I go into this team, and the attitude that I bring with me is indicative of what we at Arbinger called an inward mindset. We call that an inward mindset because what that basically means is the people that I interface with, my customers, the people reporting to me, my superiors, everybody that I impact, they're not really real to me. They don't really matter like I matter at a fundamental level. Now, we could have a discussion about this idea. We could say, look, Chip, people do matter at different levels. I mean, there are people in organizations that have more responsibility than others. True. There are people who are maybe not equal on an intellectual footing. Also true. You might be morally superior to me. You certainly could be intellectually superior to me, but at a fundamental level of analysis, we're the same. And if we were all in a room together, I could illustrate this by simply asking you, all of you, if please raise your hand if you have something in your life that matters to you deeply. And I'm willing to bet, because I've done this many times, that all the hands go up. Everybody in attendance here today has something in their life that really matters deeply to them. If I ask another question, if I said, raise your hand if you have things in your professional life, things at work you feel you need to accomplish. Again, all the hands go up. So at that fundamental level of analysis, we actually are the same. We all have things that matter deeply to us. We all have things we have to get done. obligations that we have to other people, to organizations. But when I have this attitude, this lack of self-awareness on my part, um, I don't really experience you as having things that like that. I don't experience you as having things that count like the things that I have count to me. Um, I experience my stuff as taking precedence over anything that you have going on. I wall myself off from your reality. So you actually aren't real to me. When I have this type of attitude, this type of mindset, you're not fully real. You're more like a two-dimensional representation of a person, like background scenery in the play that is my life, right? So this is the attitude that I took into that team. And so the objectives, challenges, goals, all those other things that the team members that I was sent there to lead uh, possessed, um, I had no access to those. Those were not available to me. I couldn't have a real sense of those things. Why? Well, because I was so self-absorbed. Everything that I was thinking about had to do with my objectives, my goals, and the things that I needed to accomplish. And remember, my primary objective was looking good. Again, proving something about myself to someone. So what happens then to the people in my environment? Well, they cease to be real. They're more like, again, two-dimensional representations of people, more like objects or things. Um, and so how do I think about them in that way? Like once I reduce them, I strip them of their personhood, I strip them of their agency, right? I strip them of their humanity in a sense. I see them as just revolving around me. And once I objectify them in that way, I only see them in terms of their utility or lack thereof. So, for instance, I might see people as just a means to an end. I might reduce them to a function, just to their role in an organization. I certainly did that with that team. I imagined all of these men, these were all men at the time, as pieces on a chessboard that could be manipulated to achieve my objective of looking good to the colonel. They were merely a means to an end, vehicles to help me achieve my objective, just things to be used in the environment, right? So you can imagine, like, one, how, what does that say about my self-awareness that I see myself as so separate from them? But then how are they receiving that? Certainly they're responding to my way of being with them and the fact that I'm just seeing them as objects to be manipulated. Now, so there's a category of people there when I'm in this inward mindset that I see only in terms of their utility. But there's another category of people. These are people that see things differently than me, that might have ideas that run counter to the ideas I have. These are people who might think outside the box, might not just be responding yes to every idea I have. They might even be people that have challenges or difficulties that make that not as easy for them to achieve the standards that I've set, to meet the expectations that I've set. I tend to see these people as obstacles that are in my way. They are obstructing me from achieving my goals. Um, I only see them in terms of the limitations that they're creating for me. I can't see them holistically. And again, what do we do with obstacles that are in our path, right? Well, we move them. We might destroy them, climb over them. We might even find a workaround, an alternative path to get around them. These are all things that we do with obstacles in our life that we come across. These are things that we do also with people that we conceive of as obstacles from this inward mindset. So the third primary way that I might see people that I objectify in this sense is as irrelevant. So if you can't help me and you can't hurt me, you just don't matter to me. You're not on my radar at all. And these are the people that I typically exclude. They don't get my intention. They don't get invited to the meeting. They don't get invited to the table. They just don't count. I'm going to ask you now, as you're thinking about these terms and you're thinking about the way I framed up this inward mindset, it's really a portrait of someone who has a lack of self-awareness. They're totally out of touch with what's actually happening, not only in the environment, but also within them. Think about people in your organization that might feel like vehicles. Think about people in your organization that might feel like obstacles. Then think about people in your organization that might feel like they don't count, that they don't matter, that they're overlooked. Those folks exist in every organization because this inward mindset tendency actually exists within every person in every organization. So this was my general attitude showing up. Now I want you to think about something. If this is my way of being with other people, if I'm coming into an environment where change is needed, I'm coming into an environment where people really do need to be doing things differently, but I'm showing up with this attitude of self-concern, and I'm not fully appreciating the humanity of the people that I'm interacting with, that I'm interfacing with, that I'm seeking to influence, what does that invite in them? Do you think that invites them to welcome me with open arms? No, they actually experience my attitude and my caustic way of being with them as an attack. And the invitation is for them then to get defensive. The invitation is for them to then to jump into this inward mindset themselves. And now we've got people competing against one another, feeling like there's only so much attention and success to go around. And we've set it up so that within this organization, we're cooperating with each other in a destructive way to undermine the success of everyone and the organization. So they're not free to actually focus on taking responsibility because they feel like they have to defend themselves from my accusations that they're not worthy, my accusations that they're not capable. And so you can imagine the way this might metastasize in an organization. It's so contagious, this inward mindset. It can actually infect the entire organization and then work again in a destructive way to undermine our efforts. So that's me, right? I'm coming in with this attitude. So you can just imagine what it felt like to be one of these team members. And so if you think about this in terms of the Arbinger mindset model, what's actually happening here is it is true that behaviors drive results. It is true that behaviors are important. There are some behaviors that need to change. There's policies that need to be updated. There are procedures that need to be modified. There are people that need to be maybe moved around in an organization. We need to bring in some new talent or some people with some new perspective. All that is true, but what ends up driving the effectiveness of all those behaviors, all those observable, measurable things, is my attitude, my mindset that I'm bringing to those behaviors. So if it's true that behaviors drive results, then it's also true that my underlying mindset determines the effectiveness of all the behaviors that I engage in. So it turns out there's an alternative way of leading. I can lead in this way. Certainly I can lead with an inward mindset. People have done it. People have even been successful doing it, but it's a bounded kind of success. It depends on how you define success. Like for instance, I can if with enough charisma and enough energy and enough positional authority, I can push and drive people to achieve. But the question is always this: what do I leave on the table? What would be possible if I were able to be more inclusive and thoughtful and self-aware in my leadership? That's always the question, right? So what is this alternative way of leading? Well, Arbinger, in our work, we call it the outward mindset. And we position it as an alternative to the inward mindset. And one way to think about it would be, if in an inward mindset, others don't matter like I matter, when I have an outward mindset, then I actually see others counting like I count at that fundamental level. I actually recognize that others are people. They're not objects, and people are very complex. There are many things that influence people in terms of their decision and their perception and their ability, their capacity, and their willingness to take responsibility. And because they're people, I recognize these things about them. I recognize they have goals and objectives and they have challenges, impediments. And I'm interested in these things. Those things actually matter to me as a leader who's self-aware. I take those into account. And then it changes the way I work. I go about doing all the things that I need to do as a leader. I go about achieving all the objectives that I need to achieve in a way that takes into account the impact I have on the people I affect and their ability to achieve their objectives. So working with an outward mindset is is quite a bit different than working with an inward mindset where I'm just self-concerned and self-absorbed. With an outward mindset, I'm still going to achieve my objectives, but I'm going to do it in a way that empowers other people to achieve theirs. And this alignment enables us to move forward and to achieve results with less friction, with less drag as we move through that medium of leadership. So this is the alternative way of leading. This is the self-aware way of leading. Why? Because it accounts for things the way they actually are in reality, not some virtual reality that I've created in my head where my needs, my goals are most important and other people's needs and goals and challenges fade away. So we got the outward mindset and the inward mindset. In an inward mindset, I'm focused exclusively on my results. And everything that you're trying to achieve and everything that might get in the way of you achieving it, that lives outside of my self-focused attitude, my self-focused frame of mind. I just don't have access to it. So you're not real to me. And from an inward mindset, I focus on our results, what we need to achieve. So this isn't organizational altruism in the sense that I'm ignoring all the things that I need to be doing in service of everything you need to be doing. It isn't that, right? It isn't just me focusing exclusively on others. It's me focusing on us. I'm a person and you're a person. I'm obligated to meet my objectives. I owe that to the organization, but I'm obligated to meet them in a way that actually empowers those around me and doesn't detract from their ability to contribute. So as a self-aware leader, I recognize that the way that I lead, like my primary responsibility to the organization is to take those assets that have been entrusted to me, the most important assets, which are our people, and to work to continuously develop them in their capacity to take ever increasing responsibility for the mission. My goal as a self-aware leader is to empower people to make the most meaningful contribution they can make to the organization, which is night and day different from me just seeing them as people that need to be, as objects that need to be manipulated or ignored. So when I go into that team, the way that I approach that change that needs to happen in the organization is the common way it's typically approached. The way I approached it was working only on changing the behaviors. I need less of this and more of that. I need to institute a new policy, or I need to fire some people and hire and onboard some other people. I need to set up strict codes of conduct for people to follow. And I need to have my thumb on everything and make sure I have final approval of everything that happens. I focus their head down on fixing just the behaviors. And what you've probably seen in your experience with doing this, or maybe even in your experience with trying to influence the person that you're thinking about today, the results that I get often are temporary. If I push hard enough, I can get some change. But ultimately, without a fundamental change in the way that we see ourselves in relation to each other and our obligations, that behavior, those behaviors, those fixes, I'm going to end up rebounding. I'm going to end up defaulting back to the way things were. The change isn't sustainable. The way that we actually sustain this change over a period of time, and we've learned this through years and years of research and working with client organizations and really gifted individuals. The way that we actually achieve this sustainable change is by working not only to change the behavior, which again, some of those need to change, but to change the underlying mindset that informs the behavior. And we've got data, and the data show that organizations that actually focus on the pervasive mindsets at the onset of change efforts are 4 times as likely to achieve the change thereafter, sustainable change, than organizations that ignore the mindset level, right, of this model. So you're talking about a 300% chance, a 300% better chance you're going to get the results you're after if you deal with those mindset issues up front. So how do we do that? I'm going to share with you a couple of ways of thinking about this. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like you to consider what it looks like to envision your job with an outward mindset. So the first thing is it means taking into account the people that you impact, the people that I impact in my work. So we'll build out this collaboration diagram here. kind of build the bones of this thing. And what you see is you've got me in the center as the person that's seeking to gain self-awareness, the leader that's seeking to gain self-awareness. And you've got in four directions around me. This is just basic, right? I've got my boss, the person I report to. I've got the people that report to me, the assets I'm responsible for developing. I've got my customers, the people that rely on me doing my job so they can do theirs. And then, of course, I've got peers, people I work shoulder to shoulder with. On this diagram, this collaboration diagram, the triangles on the inside, those represent my goals and my objectives. Those are all the things that I do. Those are my doings. That's what's represented there. And you can see that they're in alignment with the outside triangles on the diagram. And the outside triangles represent the needs, objectives, challenges, and goals of all the people that I impact. So I've got the inside triangles representing my work and the outside triangles representing the work of the people I impact. And you notice again in the collaboration diagram, we have alignment between those things. So this is a visual, like a graphical representation of me at work with an outward mindset. So what we want to be able to do, and there's a tool called Applying SAM that's relative to what I'm about to introduce you to. And my colleagues have placed that into the Docs tab that you have access to. They place that along with another couple of tools and resources for you. But how does this unfold? Like operationally, we've got an iteration that we've uncovered that is simple and straightforward that helps us actually embed this way of thinking about our work into how we show up with each other, into how we lead. We call this the outward mindset pattern. And the acronym we use to remember this pattern is SAM, S-A-M. So let me walk you through what that looks like. So if I'm oriented with an outward mindset toward the people I'm leading, the very first step of this pattern, this iteration is SAM, S, see others. See others. I want to strive to understand the needs, objectives, and challenges of the people that I impact. I want to get really curious about them. Notice when I came into the team, I lacked any curiosity, right? I lacked any interest in them as people. What I want to do to maintain this outward mindset, to perpetuate this in my way of leading, is I want to stay really curious. I want to dig into who these people are, what goals and objectives are they trying to achieve, what motivates them, what particular talents do they bring. More importantly, what impediments do they face? You know, when I think about influence from an inward mindset, typically what I think about is how do I get people to do the things that they're not doing currently? How do I motivate them to do the things they're not doing currently? How do I perhaps make it difficult for them to not do the things they should be doing? But when I have an outward mindset, I ask another question. And that question is, why aren't they doing it already? What constraining forces are existing in the environment that are limiting their ability to contribute or to meet their obligations? I get curious about that. Are there impediments in the path that I might be able to remove? So that's all part of seeing others, getting extremely curious about them, learning about them. And that is the first part of this iteration. Now, I'm going to learn some things by being curious, by needing to learn about people, by inquiring about why things are the way they are, what are the precedents in place that got us where we're at. And so based on what I learn, I'm going to go back to the second part of that iteration, and I'm going to adjust efforts. I'm going to make adjustments based on what I learned, adjustments in what I'm doing in terms of my leadership. So it's not a plug and play situation where I'm going to bring in the way that I've done things in the past and plug it in here and just assume that all things are equal. I'm going to actually, based on the curiosity of things I learned, make adjustments to what I'm doing to be maximally helpful to them. Now, see others, adjust efforts. The last step of that iteration is to measure impact. So I want to measure and hold myself accountable for the impact I'm having on others and their ability to do their work. I want to check in to make sure the adjustments I make are actually helpful. So it's see others, adjust efforts, measure impact by setting up a regular cadence of checking in. I'll agree with people as to the medium and the cadence that they would like me to check back in with them to assure I'm accountable for helping them achieve their objectives, for working in a way that helps them achieve their objectives. So that iteration, we just can run that, and that's actually operationalizing the outward mindset, context to context. And again, we call that the outward mindset pattern. We call that SAM. I invite you to apply that to your work. And if you think about, like, what is the work of self-aware leaders? What is it that self-aware leaders actually do? The work is actually to help move people from the center of that inward mindset diagram that you see there on the left to the center of the outward mindset diagram on the right. That's our work, right? We want to, again, train, prepare, develop, and equip them to make a meaningful contribution. We want to remove all the impediments we can remove. We want essentially to help them grow. If there isn't, like, as a leader, if you don't see growth and development in your people, that's a sign that you might not be leading from a position of self-awareness. You might be actually contributing to the problems that you're complaining about in ways that you're not fully aware of. So again, my goal is to develop people as a leader, to develop people in their capacity to take ever increasing responsibility. You don't fail as a leader if they don't grow. You fail as a leader. I fail as a leader if I don't provide an opportunity for them to grow. And so the best way that I know to help people move from the center of that anti-collaboration diagram to the center of the collaboration diagram, the outward mindset diagram, is to move myself. For me to actually, and you've probably heard this over and over again, but there's a reason why this keeps popping up in our leadership literature, and it keeps ringing true experientially as you go about your leadership journey. I have to model for them that attitude, that mindset, that way of being that I want them to adopt. I have to actually show up with them in that way. That's what it means to lead, right? To go first, to show them how we work together more collaboratively. Now, I will tell you, with my SWAT team, with the team that was troubled, I did get here. I finally got here. A lot of reading, a lot of meditating, but more than anything, a lot of coaching from people who were caring and deliberate, and they were more committed than I was to ensuring that I succeeded. They just inspired me in so many ways, but they shared with me this work, and I applied it. I started leading differently. Things got worse before they got better because, of course, I doubled down on my inward mindset. Just pushed harder. That was in my nature. But eventually things started to change as I started to operationalize this outward mindset pattern that I introduced you to, not only with the people that reported to me, but with all the stakeholders. We started to see incremental change occurring in that team. And what ended up happening with that team was actually amazing. It's actually, the story's been captured in a couple of books, but let me share with you, let's go back to just that one KPI that I shared with you up front. So this, if you remember, this was the complaints, the community complaints filed against this team and the cost of those complaints. Now, I want to note, this is just monetary cost. I'm not talking about the damaged trust and all the relationships that got wrecked, and the lack of confidence on the part of the community and the police. Like, those things are really hard to measure. We can measure the dollars and cents. So that's the thing we're focusing on now. And again, remember, going into this assignment, I was thinking to myself, there's nothing you can really do to reduce complaints associated with that type of work. SWAT teams do, again, kinetic work. You're going to get complaints. That was kind of my belief. I wasn't taking into account the power of self-awareness, comprehensive self-awareness, and the power of showing up with people with an outward mindset. When that started happening, when I started doing that with my team, that invited them to start doing that with our customers and our other stakeholders. And what ends up happening is we didn't actually reduce the complaints. We completely eliminated them. So gone, 100% reduction in these community complaints that were causing so much problem, so much friction, and also costing us $25 million per decade. They were eliminated. Now, when I share that story with people, that stat, they're tempted to think, well, yeah, Chip, you probably just quit arresting people. Like if you're not arresting people, then they're not going to be complaining. You guys probably went soft on crime. But actually, the truth of the matter is, during the same time period that we eliminated those complaints, we received an award from the chief of police for tripling our gun seizures, drug seizures, and felony arrests. So think about that. This is the power of a mindset shift. Without changing policies, equipment, protocols, no legislative changes, none of that changed. The customer base didn't change. The personnel didn't change. The only thing that changed was our fundamental attitude toward the people we were serving, internally and externally. And we completely transformed results. We tripled the amount of seizures and arrests that we got. We started fishing with a spear, not a net. And it changed everything in terms of the way that we worked. We could actually do that type of hard, difficult work in a way that actually built trust and collaboration. And again, the power of this, the only thing that changed was our mindset going into this. So that sold me, right? That's actually why I'm working here now at the Arbinger Institute since I've retired from policing. That convinced me. If it can work in an environment like that, when I was at my most inward, I thought it's hopeless. There's nothing I can do. And I can just kick the can down the road, do the best I can here, but I'm not going to be able to make a significant difference. And if I'm honest with you, it wasn't me that made the significant difference. It was the willingness of the people that I was leading to embrace this new way of seeing one another, this new way of seeing and understanding our community. But a very, very powerful testimony to what can happen when I change mindset. So now I'm going to go back to thinking. I want to leave you with another tool, and this tool is also in your docs tab. I'm going to go back to having you think about that person that you're trying to influence, you're working to influence. And I want you to think about that person, and we're going to apply a tool called Meet to Give. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. I'm going to push you through this because I want to save time for questions from the attendees here. But thinking about that person that needs to change in some way, I want you to take and jot down, make a note of what are their objectives? What is this person trying to achieve? What impediments might be in their way? What constraining forces might be at work that are limiting their ability to meet expectations? Just make a couple of notes. Jot down a couple of things. You're completely objective. You're stepping outside of the situation. You're just imagine what those things might be. And you might be alive to them. They might be obvious. You might not have been focused on them. If all you've been focusing on is the impact they're having on you, these things might have faded away, but they have them. They exist. And if you really are stumped, you're like, gosh, I have no idea what this person might be trying to achieve at an individual level, or how they might see themselves in relation to the organization and our objectives. Well, that's a clue. If you have no idea, that's a clue that maybe you haven't been curious. Maybe you haven't been properly diagnosing the problem comprehensively. You've been prescribing without diagnosing. So we list out their objectives. And the next step is, and this is self-awareness, like in effect here. Like this takes a high degree of self-awareness. This is why we have to turn outward to answer this question honestly. The next question is, in what ways have I made things more difficult for this person? What have I done that has made things more difficult for this person? What have I not done? Have I withheld help or resources or some other thing that might be helpful from this person? So it could be things that I'm doing, it could be things that I'm not doing, that if I were doing, it might make things easier. What are the ways that you have not made things easier for this person, or ways you made things more difficult? The last time I ran this tool, it was something as simple, because you don't have to think like, you might not be abusive. Matter of fact, you might be well-intentioned, but there might be things that you've done that have made things more difficult. And it wasn't your intent, but it happened. The last time I ran this, it was as simple as I didn't put my out of office email reply on my email when I left the country. So I've got team members that are waiting to make decisions. And because I violated that expectation, the expectation that we all have, that the organization has of all of us, that I notify people when I'm out of the office and not responding, because I did that, they're waiting on me to respond. and I'm not responding. I'm incommunicado, right? I'm not going to respond, but I didn't notify them of that. So it caused delays. And that was a way that I showed up and made things more difficult. Again, not intentionally, but I did it. So it could be a small thing like that. It could be a big thing like gossiping about them behind their back, talking about them, not to them. Now, the next step is we want to think of ways we could be helpful. What are some ways we could actually be helpful? How can we improve? And I want to caution you here. These shouldn't be grand gestures like big things. You know, success, it's measured in small increments. There's an aggregation of these marginal gains that happen. We want to shoot for like 1 or 2% improvements. We don't want to aim too high. It's like January 1, I'm going to start a new diet. I'm going to clear all the carbs out of my pantry and go cold turkey. That's not sustainable for most people. It's the same thing here. If you have some big proclamation that you're turning over a new leaf and you're going to be a completely different person, that's hard to sustain. It requires a whole lot of discipline and external support. But there might be 1 or 2 things you could do to create minor improvements. If you think about a baseball metaphor, we're not trying to hit it out of the park. We're just trying to get on base. How do we get on base? What are a couple things you can do that might create some improvement in this relationship or compensate in a helpful way for the ways you made things more difficult? So you think of a couple things. Okay. Now the next thing is I'm going to ask you to look in your calendars, send an invitation to this person so that you can sit down and meet with them and actually offer the help that you've thought of offering. So this is a meet to give. It's typically when we're meeting with people, we're meeting to get something from them. This is turning that idea on its head. What we're doing in this case is we're meeting to give them help. We're meeting to give them something. So again, this is a way of inviting them again to be considerate by showing up in a considerate way. This is the essence of the outward mindset. So you've got the Apply SAM tool and you've got the Meet to Give tool there that are available to you. I'd like to wrap up today's webinar by leaving the last 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to open it up. And unfortunately, I can't interact with you. Thus my awkwardness, by the way, in this presentation. I can't interact with you in real time because of this format. But what I can do is look in the chat for questions. So let me pop back up here, and I'm going to be looking in the chat for questions. And if you have any, please just throw them in the chat. And we'll be looking in the Q&A section, I guess. I need to be in the right section. Okay, got something from Kyle here. Let me pull this up. We have to strive to understand others' objectives. I probably don't need to be reading that to all of you. You can probably read it. But some part of a leader is to define the objectives for others. Is it fair to say that part of seeing others is maybe not what the objectives are, but how they define the objectives? Yeah, so I think part of our work, Kyle, great question. Part of our work in seeing others as a leader is to help them better understand what we're trying to accomplish as an organization and to properly frame their objectives. So for instance, I have to clarify their role in the organization. They come into the organization, we hire them to fill a specific position in the organization. My job as a leader is to get real clarity for them around what they're obligated to do as a condition of their employment. So there's their role, their job title, and then as a consequence of that job title, every job in an organization exists for the purpose of achieving some objective or objectives. And I have to help them understand that objective and then help them understand what responsibilities they have to fulfill in order to achieve it. So my job is to be a resource for them to help them develop it. So it does start out with getting alignment on what is it they're actually supposed to be focusing on. The part that's individualistic for them is that particular person is bringing particular skill set, particular challenges with them into that role. And my job is to help. My job as an outward mindset leader is to help to gain understanding of that so I can help them overcome the things that might serve as impediments or to help support and help them grow along a projected growth track so they can be a better contributor, if you will, to the organization. Great question. Joe, you worked in an environment where you worked with strong personalities. My person is very strong-willed and sees themselves as an expert, not open to feedback. What would you suggest as a first step? Well, often, like for me, what I tried to do was I tried to invalidate their self-view. I tried to basically step up and show them that they weren't as good as they thought they were. That backfired because, again, it invited defensiveness. What I found that I needed to do was actually build a relationship with this person so I'd have credibility. And the way that I could do that is by getting curious with them, sitting down and finding things that I could actually learn from them and being interested in their perspective. So this is like non-kinetic work, right? The building the relationship piece. But I know with one particular employee, they had a lot of complaints about the way things were. And a lot of those things were systemic and they required, well, at least a few of them required a lot of effort to change. But I found in listening to them and talking with them, a couple of kind of pieces of low-hanging fruit, things that I could actually affect immediately that built credibility with that person. And so things that I could actually do something about, I did. Make a commitment, follow through on a commitment, demonstrate consistency and reliability. That actually improves my relational trust with them. And then I'm able to gain more influence. So sometimes, that person lean into that, right? Yeah. I mean, talk to them, question them, actually demonstrate that you value their expertise. Don't work to refute it or to think about it as an impediment. You turn that impediment actually into an advantage. Great question. What are the best ways, Manelli, what are the best ways to engage with a large department? I have 70 personnel in my police department and struggle getting FaceTime with everyone. Thank you. What a great question. So first of all, you can't, in a large department, you can't actually get FaceTime with every single person in the organization frequently, right? Because you're at a strategic level. So you're leading at a high level. You're thinking about vision, right? You're thinking about forecasting and planning. But what you can do is through your chain of command, through your organizational chart, the way you're leading with your direct reports cascades throughout that organization. The way you design your policies, practices, the way you implement, right, the way you characterize and communicate your strategic vision communicates your attitude, your intent, and your mindset to them. So there are things you can do at a tactical level in terms of town halls and things of that nature. It doesn't matter so much what format your connection takes. It's the attitude you bring into that connection. One thing that I learned, Manelli, early on is that there are no insignificant interactions. Every contact I have with every single person in the organization is an opportunity to build or destroy relationship. So I value every single contact, and I come into that contact to the best of my ability with curiosity, outwardness, benevolence, concern for that person, and I stay interested. So it ends up being, it's part of your brand that, you're just a caring, compassionate, interested leader, and everybody you interact with then becomes an ambassador for you. You didn't see everybody in the organization, but the people you did see, you were authentic with. And they knew they counted, and that becomes kind of the reputation you have. As people talk about you, that's what they associate you with. So every contact matters. Every contact is important and significant. Let me see here. We've still got couple minutes left. How would you navigate this? This is Joanna. How would you navigate this when the person you're struggling with is a superior? They have an inward mindset and it makes it difficult to have any of these conversations. Yeah, first of all, I'd caution you, Joanna, I'd caution anyone listening or participating today. I really don't like to label other people's mindsets. It's too tempting for me. It's too easy to get wrong. There might be so many things happening and going on with them that I'm not fully privy to, that I don't fully understand, and that this work is best applied when it's applied to me, when I apply it to myself, when I start asking, in what ways am I demonstrating an inwardness? It's dangerous ground to start thinking, man, this person really needs to hear this, or this person really needs to change their mindset. Now, there may be some behaviors they need to change. And to your point, when they're a superior, it's a different nuance. But at the end of the day, um, sometimes you have positional authority and sometimes you don't, but you're always leading based on the way that you're showing up. So you can think about this leader, and the meet to give tool that we just went over might be a good entree into strengthening a relationship with this person. Walking through that tool with that person in mind, what can you do as a subordinate to maybe compensate for some difficulties you've been creating intentionally or otherwise? What offer of help can you give them as a superior? So instead of focusing so much on changing them, focus on giving them a different person to respond to, a person who is responsive and interested in them as a leader. Um, and again, if you're having problems having these conversations, maybe you just meet with them with the intention of not sharing anything, but learning from them and their perspective. And again, that's a good way to establish trust with that person so that you can gain more leverage. Leading up is definitely an art. It's definitely an art, but you can end up actually making up a lot of ground by simply just demonstrating for them the type of leadership that you'd like to see from them. This is it looks my last one. Yeah, given our time here. How do you deal with, this is from Andrea, how do you deal with leadership that is resistant to change, micromanaging, and lack of trust? Well, so let me just take one aspect of that, given the time we got left. Micromanaging. So micromanaging is a conclusion that I make, and I'm assuming that's based on a set of facts, meaning they're doing things that are observable, like maybe they're asking me to check in frequently. My interpretation of that might be micromanagement. From an outward mindset, I want to question my interpretation. Why else might they be engaging in that behavior that I'm characterizing as micromanaging? And then what can I do proactively? This might be a result of some anxiety on their part. Maybe they've had some past things backfire on them, right? Because they were uninformed, or things didn't go to plan because they weren't involved enough. Maybe they got feedback that they haven't been involved enough. And so in order to encourage them to be more eyes on, hands off, what I want to do is I want to actually get ahead of that by over reporting. I want to share. I want to think from their perspective. If they were feeling insecure about something or like they were lacking knowledge, how can I proactively develop systems where I can share openly? So I'm going to come to them without them asking. I'm going to come to them and share my path forward, share my plan, share my thoughts proactively. I'm going to lean into it. And then what's going to happen over a period of time, what generally happens is they come to trust me. They come to see that I'm reliable, and they tend to take a breath and ease up and back off a little bit. So folks, look, that's all the time we have. We're coming up on an hour. Thank you so much for attending today and for participating today. And I really appreciate the gift of your questions. You've got more resources, more opportunities to engage with Arbinger there in the docs tab. My colleagues have put resources in there for you, links you can follow. Please follow up with us. We'd love to hear more from you. We'd love to work more with you to help you navigate these situations. And thank you again today for the gift of your time. And I look forward to seeing you at our next event.